She trusted him. She believed every word he said. So when Kenneth Copeland asked for a faith offering, she handed over her last few dollars, money meant for groceries, rent, maybe even medication. Now, a viral video has viewers stunned and outraged. Did Copeland really manipulate a vulnerable elderly woman for cash? Was it a moment of spiritual conviction or cold exploitation? What happened next shocked even his most loyal followers. It started like a normal day at the prayer call center of Kenneth Copeland Ministries Canada. Suzanne, who worked as a partner service specialist, picked up the phone just like she always did. On the other end was a kind, elderly woman living in a senior home. Her voice was soft and gentle, and she explained that she had been watching the Copelands on the Believer's Voice of Victory broadcast. She felt deeply moved by what she heard. The teaching about giving a 100-fold seed to receive blessings from God. She truly believed that if she gave, God would reward her in return. And so she told Suzanne she wanted to sow her seed, not $50, 0 cents, not $500, 0 cents, but nearly $90,000, 0 cents. Everything she had saved up in her life. Suzanne was stunned. Instantly, something didn't feel right in her spirit. This woman was clearly sincere. She wasn't confused, she wasn't rambling. She was simply acting on faith. But it was the kind of faith built on very dangerous teaching. Suzanne knew this woman lived in a care home. That money wasn't extra. It was what she needed to survive, to eat, to pay for care, to live. But the woman was determined. She kept saying, "I'm putting my faith on it. God will take care of me." Because of the high amount, Suzanne had to bring in her supervisor. The ministry had limits on how much money any one employee could process. The supervisor came in, then someone even higher up, and they all worked together to break the amount into smaller chunks because the woman's credit card had limits. They used multiple transactions, possibly even pulled from her bank account, to complete the full amount. Suzanne said she felt sick afterward. She wasn't proud. It wasn't a joyful donation. It felt wrong. And then something strange happened. 2 days later, the same woman called again. Out of all the dozens of employees working the phones, Suzanne picked up her call again. The woman sounded different this time. Upset, embarrassed. She told Suzanne that she had spoken to her accountant, and he was horrified. He told her it was a mistake. She shouldn't have given away that money. She couldn't afford to. She realized she had made a decision out of emotion, not wisdom, and she asked for it back. Suzanne was relieved to hear from her. It felt like a second chance to do the right thing. She went straight to her supervisor. The request went to the director. There were meetings. There were discussions. And then came the final answer. No. The money had been processed. It had gone into the CRA, the Canadian equivalent of IRS. It was locked in. Suzanne tried to argue, tried to reason with them. She explained that this was an elderly woman, that she was in tears, that she clearly needed this money to survive. Couldn't they refund it from another account? Couldn't they find a way? The answer stayed the same. No, it's been processed. That's it. No compassion, no prayer, no questions about the woman's well-being, just silence and closed doors. A transaction. It was then that Suzanne realized this wasn't a ministry in the way most people imagine. It operated like a business. Call center employees had quotas. Their bathroom breaks were tracked. Their prayer calls were timed. And those who gave the most? They were often praised, not questioned. This wasn't about helping people walk with God. This was about closing the deal. What's worse, in most parts of North America, retail stores offer return policies. 30 days for furniture, even a 72-hour window for home sales. But this woman couldn't get her donation back after just 2 days, even though she asked nicely, humbly, and explained the situation. No one at the ministry ever called her back to apologize. Not a single person followed up. And to this day, Suzanne says it was one of the worst days of her life because she was forced to participate in something she believed was deeply wrong, and no one seemed to care. That's not faith. That's not ministry. That's financial exploitation, dressed up in Christian language. When you hear the words Christian ministry, you probably imagine a peaceful place, kind people, prayer, maybe some worship music playing in the background, and a shared mission to help others. But for the people who worked behind the scenes at Kenneth Copeland Ministries, especially in their call centers, the reality was very, very different. Suzanne worked at KCM Canada for almost 4 years. At first, she was excited. She thought she was joining something meaningful, a ministry that truly wanted to pray with people and help them grow in faith. She had experience in design and communication, but here she was trained to work as a partner service specialist, answering phone calls from viewers, taking prayer requests, and processing donations. It sounded like the perfect way to serve and support people. But the deeper she got into it, the more she realized something was wrong. Let's start with the phones. The call center was set up like a sales floor, not a prayer room. Employees were expected to answer as many calls as possible, and every call was tracked. There were metrics for everything: how many inbound calls you answered, how many outbound calls you made, how long each call lasted, how long you were away from your desk. Even bathroom breaks were logged and reviewed. If you needed a drink of water, someone might suggest, "Why don't you just get a filter for your desk so you don't have to leave so often?" It wasn't a suggestion, it was pressure. Each week, the employees were called into the boardroom. There, on a big screen, they'd see a spreadsheet with all their names, and next to each name, a list of numbers. How many calls did you take? How long were you on hold? How many times did you step away from your desk? Who's on top? And who's at the bottom? Suzanne remembers staring at that board, heart pounding, afraid to be last. One time she was second to last, and she thought, "Are they going to fire me?" And they did fire people, or push them out through stress, fear, or humiliation. Suzanne herself experienced this firsthand. After a few months on the phones, she was offered a new position working in media and marketing, which was closer to her skill set. She was excited, finally thinking she could do something she loved. But the training was rushed and messy. They didn't take her off the phones. She was trying to juggle 2 jobs, answering calls all day and staying late to create marketing content. She was overwhelmed. She made a few mistakes. Nothing huge. Once she forgot to attach a file to an email. Another time she misunderstood an instruction. Simple things, human things. But there was no grace, no support. Instead, she was told to go home and wait. "We'll let you know by Friday if you still have a job." She spent 3 days in panic. She was a single mom. She had a mortgage. She prayed and cried and hoped. On Friday, they called her in and said, "We've decided to give you another chance." She was relieved. She was ready to work hard. She thought it was over. But the following week, during a regular staff meeting, something happened that left her speechless. David Stiles, the director of KCM Canada, stood up and made an announcement. "Let's all congratulate Holly on her new role as Partner Service Specialist." Everyone clapped. Suzanne sat frozen. That was her position. No one had told her she was being replaced. She had just found out, in front of everyone, that she'd been demoted. She held back tears, trying to smile and pretend she was okay. That kind of public shaming happened more than once. It was subtle, but intentional, a way to remind employees that they were replaceable, always being watched, and should be grateful to still have a seat at the table. There was no place for emotion, compassion, or open conversation. If you were struggling, you had to hide it. If you needed help, you better think twice. Any complaint could be viewed as disloyalty or bad attitude. The message was clear: fall in line or fall out. And then there was the spiritual side of things, which, ironically, made it all worse. Every meeting, every devotional, every group prayer was used not to bring comfort, but to reinforce control. Scriptures were read in ways that emphasized obedience, submission, excellence, and staying in agreement with leadership. Employees were taught that their personal struggles were a sign of weak faith, that if something bad was happening in your life, like sickness, stress, or anxiety, it was probably your fault for not standing on the word. Suzanne said it felt like losing herself. She began questioning her own spiritual life. She started hiding her anxiety. She avoided talking to coworkers about her personal life. She felt alone, stuck, afraid. It was hard to believe that this was a Christian workplace. And then came the final blow. Suzanne broke her ankle and was placed on official medical leave, approved by a doctor. She was ordered to stay off her feet. No walking, no stress. 2 weeks into her leave, she got a call. She needed to come into the office for a meeting. She didn't think much of it. Maybe they wanted to check in. Maybe they had an update. She hobbled in on crutches. Sitting at the table was David Stiles and the HR manager. Papers were already laid out. She was told, "We've decided to let you go." No clear reason, no warning. Just like that. Then came the twist. They said she could sign a document saying she had resigned voluntarily in exchange for a small severance. If she refused, she'd get nothing. She had no choice. She took it. She needed the money to survive while she healed. She walked out of the building, heartbroken and confused. Later, a friend who still worked at the ministry told her what was said in the next staff meeting. David told everyone, "Suzanne won't be returning. She's decided to take a new path." It was a lie. They fired her, but told the staff she had left on her own. That moment broke something inside her. She had given everything to that job. She had prayed with people. She had worked through grief and anxiety. She had stayed late. She had tried to make it work. And in the end, they treated her like she didn't matter. She didn't speak about it for a long time. She was afraid. Afraid of how it would reflect on her or on Christianity as a whole. But holding it in only made it worse. It took years for her to start healing, to talk about it, to realize it wasn't her fault. And sadly, her story isn't unique. Many people who worked for KCM, both in the US and Canada, describe the same patterns: spiritual manipulation, emotional pressure, silence, shame, fear. They called it a ministry. But to those who worked there, it felt more like a machine. A place where you prayed with people on the phone, not because you had time, but because it helped bring in money. A place where mistakes were punished, concerns were ignored, and image mattered more than integrity. It wasn't a ministry, not in the way Jesus taught. It was a workplace built on control, silence, and fear, dressed in the language of faith, and it left scars that many are still trying to heal from. Bonnie Parker believed with all her heart that God would heal her. She believed it because she had watched Gloria Copeland's healing school for years. She had heard it said over and over, "Cancer is from the devil. All you need is faith. Sow your seed, speak the word, and your healing will come." So she did exactly that. Bonnie was a quiet woman from a small town in Louisiana. She didn't have much, but she gave what she could to Kenneth Copeland Ministries, KCM. Sometimes it was small amounts, sometimes more. She would write letters, include her prayer requests, and send donations, again and again, believing that if she had enough faith and sowed enough seed, her healing would show up. She kept notebooks full of her thoughts, prayers, and messages she heard from the Copelands. After she passed away in 2004, her family found those notebooks. They were heartbreaking to read. Page after page, she had written down what Gloria said on TV. She had written scriptures. She had listed the money she sent. She had even written confessions. "I am healed. I will not die." She wasn't just hopeful. She was desperate. She had cancer, but she refused to go to the doctor. Her daughter said she was furious that her mom wouldn't seek medical help. But Bonnie only wanted to go to healing school in Dallas. She believed if she could just get there, lay hands on the stage, and sow her offering in person, she would walk away free of cancer. She never made it. She died still holding on to a promise she had been sold by people she trusted on a television screen. A promise that her healing was guaranteed if she just had enough faith and gave enough money. That story may sound extreme, but it's not unique. Paula, a former KCM employee, said she once did the same thing. Years ago, after watching Gloria Copeland teach on healing, she put her hand on the TV screen, prayed the healing prayer, and stopped taking her insulin. She's diabetic. She believed in that moment that she was healed. By the end of the day, her blood sugar went over 500 and she started vomiting. She was lucky to survive. The theology KCM teaches is called the prosperity gospel, or word of faith. On the surface, it sounds inspiring, full of declarations, positive thinking, and bold prayers. But beneath that surface is a dangerous idea that your blessings and your healing depend on your giving. That God will respond to your level of faith, and faith is shown by how much money you give, or how fully you claim your miracle. It turns healing into a transaction, a formula. Put in a seed and get out your blessing. Give $1,000, 0 cents, and expect $100,000, 0 cents, in return. Speak the right scripture, and your body must obey. But life doesn't work that way, and neither does God. People are left believing that if healing doesn't come, it's their fault. They didn't give enough. They didn't believe hard enough. They didn't hold fast to their confession. So they keep giving, keep confessing, keep avoiding doctors until it's too late. What makes it even more painful is the hypocrisy. While followers like Bonnie are dying for lack of medical treatment, the Copelands themselves have access to the best doctors in the country. Kenneth Copeland even spoke openly once about flying to Florida for back treatment from a well-known Christian doctor. He didn't sow a seed and stand on faith. He got real medical help. But the people watching their programs don't always know that. All they see is the message. You don't need doctors, you just need to believe and give. Some call it faith. Others call it manipulation. But the result is the same. People suffer. Suzanne, another former employee of KCM Canada, said it affected her too. She began experiencing panic attacks and anxiety. But when she talked to leadership about it, she was told it was wrong theology to believe that God could allow suffering for any reason. She was told that her fear wasn't from God, so it must be her fault. She started to believe that maybe she didn't have enough faith. Maybe she wasn't spiritual enough. Maybe her pain was proof that something was wrong with her walk with God. She felt ashamed. It's not just bad theology, it's harmful theology. It tells people to ignore reality, to avoid help, to feel guilt when things don't go right, and to give more money as the solution to everything. At the end of the day, real faith isn't a transaction. God isn't a vending machine, and suffering isn't always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's part of the journey. Sometimes healing comes through doctors. Sometimes it doesn't come at all, and that doesn't mean God has left you. But this kind of theology doesn't leave room for that. It sells a dream that not even the preachers themselves believe, while everyday people like Bonnie pay the ultimate price, and no one is held accountable. When Suzanne was let go from Kenneth Copeland Ministries Canada, she didn't just lose a job, she lost a piece of herself. And she didn't even realize how much damage had been done until months, even years later. At first, she tried to carry on. She told herself it was just a job change. She tried to believe it was for the best. But deep down, something was broken. Not just emotionally, but spiritually too. For almost 4 years, she had given her heart to that place. She prayed with strangers on the phone every day. She spoke scripture over their lives. She cried with people. She tried to make them feel seen and heard. She wasn't just working in ministry, she was doing ministry. And then, in a moment, she was gone, quietly erased. There was no farewell, no thank you, no compassion, just a final meeting, a folder full of paperwork, and a fake announcement to the staff saying she had chosen a different path. But she hadn't. That was a lie. They fired her during her medical leave, while she was recovering from a broken ankle, and told everyone else that it was her decision. For weeks, Suzanne couldn't bring herself to talk about it. When her kids asked what happened, she couldn't explain it. How do you tell your children that a place you loved, a Christian ministry, treated you like you were disposable? She started waking up anxious. She doubted herself constantly. She kept replaying everything in her head, wondering what she did wrong. She had given so much. She had worked late, handled pressure, dealt with stress. She thought it was her calling. But now, she felt ashamed, confused, and alone. The worst part was the silence, the total lack of accountability. No one reached out. No one from leadership said sorry, not even once. It was like she had never existed. For Paula, who worked at the KCM headquarters in Texas, the story was painfully similar. She had left years earlier, back in 2007, but the effects still followed her to this day. Even now, she says she struggles with things that were planted in her back then. Self-doubt, spiritual confusion, and a deep sadness over what she saw behind closed doors. She remembers watching people around her, faithful employees who lived paycheck to paycheck while leadership flew in private jets and wore designer clothes. She remembers being told to keep quiet, to fall in line, to never question. After leaving, she struggled to go back to church. Everything reminded her of the control, the manipulation, the shame. She felt like her trust had been shattered. She didn't know how to rebuild it. Both women say that what they experienced wasn't just bad management, it was spiritual abuse. When a workplace uses God's name to control people, shame them, or silence them, that goes deeper than a normal toxic job. It messes with your faith, your identity, even your relationship with God. Over time, the damage shows up in unexpected ways. Some people lose their passion for ministry completely. Others stop praying. Some question their beliefs. Some walk away from the church altogether, but healing is possible. For Suzanne, speaking out has been a huge part of that healing. After years of silence, she finally shared her story publicly. And to her surprise, people listened. She received messages of support. People told her they had gone through the same thing. She wasn't alone. Paula said the same. For years, she had felt like she was living in the shadows, but connecting with Suzanne gave her strength. It reminded her that she wasn't crazy, that what she experienced really happened, that someone else saw it too. The two women now continue to share their experiences, not out of bitterness, but out of hope. They want others to know that if you've been hurt by a church or a ministry, you're not alone. Your pain is valid, and more importantly, it wasn't your fault. They're learning to trust again, slowly, carefully. They still believe in Jesus, still believe in grace, but they also know now that not every ministry reflects God's heart, and sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is walk away from a place that's abusing His name. Healing doesn't always come quickly, but it does come. Sometimes through therapy, sometimes through prayer, sometimes through new, healthier communities, and sometimes just by telling your story out loud and realizing you're finally free. Suzanne once said, "I was afraid to speak out because I didn't want to make Christianity look bad, but I've realized now, this isn't about Christianity. This is about people using it for power." She's right. Real faith doesn't silence, real leadership doesn't control, and real healing begins with truth.